there's no clear meaning on this, and everyone according to how far we go with this meaning, but that's what it is. Question was about processed foods. Processed foods. There is a meaning not to use processed foods because you did not yourself see what was there. Now, but we are dependent on processed foods, right? We need wine and grape juice and matzah. So obviously, it's not a meaning that's set in stone. This is how it is. It's a meaning that which people, many have a meaning, they try their best to avoid processed foods. So there are people who make their own wine, actually. But again, when it comes to these things, there's different ways that I look at these. This be an example with wine. So someone approached me a while ago, it was a year or two ago, and he said he has some wine that's homemade, homemade wine for Pesach. And yes, maybe I'm interested, maybe if I'm interested in buying, wine instead of getting it from the factory, then you made it at home. I asked my father, and he said, no, he actually prefers from the company, from the factory. Why? Because he says that the factory, the machines that they have, the filters that they have, no one beats the filters that factories have. They have high-end filters and have many filters that filter the wine that no one at home could beat those machines. So he says he actually prefers the wine from the factory. Others are the proper, very good hechsher kosher Pesach. He prefers that over homemade wines because of the filtering process. But again, in general, we try to there is a custom that many people have, and again, you decide how far you want to go with it. But many people will avoid processed foods. But something interesting about milchiks. It's brought down that the Rebbe Rashab did have milchiks, and also I heard actually from the Barris talking that we know that the Rebbe ate on Pesach milk and cottage cheese, which was processed foods. So what does it say? Again, obviously, it doesn't mean to negate the stringency of processed foods. We're just saying that it's not set in stone, and doesn't mean. That it means if we are those who are careful with processed foods, it means now they should eat milchiks because they never did it. There's no clear answer to that. You don't know. It could be that that's what we needed to have. This health. But it's okay. And so that can mean it could mean if it's important to you, if someone needs it for their health, it's a food that's important for them. So again, there you go. There is that idea that it's not set in stone. There is a meaning brought down not to use ginger and cinnamon, because it is brought in Shulchan Aruch they put cinnamon into charesis, but we don't put cinnamon into charesis because also ginger, the cinnamon is something else. No, that's a cinnamon. Huh? Cinnamon, that's the two. There's something else. No. Yeah, cinnamon and ginger. So no, there's a custom. Some put cinnamon into the places, maybe also ginger, but we don't. But it never brings my blood that we don't do it because of a concern of chametz. Back then, there was a concern of chametz. But according to many Rabbanim, if you know for sure 1,000% from the beginning to the end that everything is 1,000%, there's no issue of chametz. You could use ginger. Even, for example, just give you another example, like Shulchan it speaks about not using dry fruits because they used to sprinkle, in the olden days, they would sprinkle flour on the dried figs, on the figs that were put to dry, came dried figs. And the grapes that they put to dry to make raisins, they would mix with the dried figs, and mix with the figs that were set to dry, which had flour on it. So there was this custom not to use dried fruits. Then the Alter Rebbe says, but if you know for a fact that there's no concern of chametz, then it's okay to use. So a lot of the things I wanted to use, then the Alter Rebbe clearly says, but if you know for a fact that it's fine, then you can use it. And the same thing is also this Alter brings not to use cloves, saffron, because they would mix flour with water and sprinkle that on the saffron. And the cloves they would soak in water that had barley in it. But Alter doesn't say clearly that if you know for a fact that it's okay, so could be some will still keep this custom. So, but in any case, there's a lot of these things that because it was kept those days, they still keep it. But not necessarily, does it always work like that? But we spoke about the dried fruits. There's a custom. The Alter Rebbe says, but if the reason doesn't apply, you know everything is okay, then you could use the dried fruits. Okay, some of you got questions? Oh, okay. And then there's another custom brought in Shulchan. This is brought in halacha, but it's a custom, not halacha, but it's brought that you should have a separate pot for eggs. Because the egg is the shell. Yeah? You cook it with the shell. It's one thing you can't peel before you cook it. I mean, you can make scrambled eggs, yeah, but I'm saying if you want to, yeah, you have to cook. If you want to boil eggs, you have to boil it with the shell. You can't peel it and then boil it and have hard-boiled eggs without the shell. So you boil it with the shell. There's a meaning to use a separate pot because the shell, the hot water is taken out from the shell. So there is that meaning to keep a separate pot, which is not such a difficult meaning to have. Just buy one more pot for eggs. Okay, any questions? Okay. Now another halacha about afikomen that I didn't mention. Then it's brought in Shulchan Aruch that one should be careful to eat afikomen before midnight, because afikomen commemorates the current Pesach, and the current Pesach had to be eaten before midnight. So it's not an obligation that you have to eat the afikomen before midnight, but it's a proper thing to eat afikomen before midnight because afikomen represents the current Pesach, which was eaten before midnight. However, Minhag Chabad is only to be particular about it on the first night of Pesach, the night of the 15th, when they actually ate the current Pesach. So the first night we are particular, which means that we try to not to overdo on the Divrei Torah. When we say Divrei Torah, we try to pay attention to the clock. But the second night, those who want to, elaborate on the Divrei Torah, you go ahead and whenever you have came, that should be came. So we're going to continue now with halachas, other halachas. The first day of Pesach. We are switching in the davening from Mash V'ruch Mered Geshem to Mered Atol. In the second bracha of the Amidah, we mention the rain, and then later on we ask for rain. So on the first day of Pesach, we're going to be switching, instead not asking for rain, but rather just asking for dew. Mered Atol. So we switch from Mash V'ruch Mered Geshem to Mered Atol. And if we make a mistake and we say Mash V'ruch Mered Geshem, should we do with a siddur or try without a siddur? Try without a siddur? Try without. If we need to, we'll take siddur. Yeah, if you want. So if we do make a mistake and we say as we used to, so when do we switch? The first day, Musaf. That's when we switch. Now, if we do make a mistake and we say Mash Mered Geshem, so we have to correct ourselves. But it's not enough just to correct yourself and say the words Mered Atol. You have to go back to the beginning of that bracha. It's not really about going back to the bracha, because the first three brachas of Shneses are like one bracha. So it's about going back to correct your mistake. In other words, it's like if you make, for example, if you make a mistake and say the wrong thing, if you want to correct the sentence, you want to go back and correct the whole sentence so it should make sense. Otherwise, it sounds like you're not undoing what you said. like for example, I don't know if it's a good example. You say, you tell someone you need to do this, and you tell them the wrong thing. So you want to correct yourself. So what are you going to do? Just say this. No, repeat the sentence. No, you need to do this, right? The same thing. Because we said something that shouldn't have been said, and it's considered a negative thing to mention rain in the summer, because in most places, summer is a time when you don't want rain. Because of the season, it's a time that you don't want rain. So rain in the summer is considered a curse. So because rain was mentioned, you want to undo it. So how do we want to sort of take back what you said? Now, once you said something, you can't take it back, obviously it came out. But you could make a complete sentence, not just saying, made it at all. You mentioned rain. Not mentioned rain. How do you make up for it? You say, made it at all. Hashem brings down dew. But you already said Hashem brings down rain. So you go back to the beginning. To Hebron, you are great Hashem, you resurrect the dead, you help, and you bring down dew. So now you're correcting your sentence. A lot of people make that mistake. They say the wrong thing, they right away say no, and you have to actually go back to Alter Gibber. The common mistake. No, Alter Gibber, go back to Alter Gibber. Now, if you continue on and you say Hashem's name, and you finish the bracha saying Baruch Atah Hashem B'Chai HaMesim, then you go back to the beginning of the Amidah. And the reason is, essentially, you should be going back to the beginning of the bracha. But the first three brachas is considered like one bracha. So you go back to the beginning of the Amidah. You don't have to go back 3 steps. You went through the 3 steps. You're still in the Amidah, but you're going back to the beginning. Now, if you only said Baruch Atah Hashem and didn't say B'Chai HaMesim, there's a machlokes. Alter Rebbe doesn't talk about it, and there's a machlokes. What do? Do you finish the bracha and go back? Do you say? Some say, I don't want to confuse you. We just mentioned it. Some say on being careful. What do you say? What do you do when you say Baruch? You make a bracha by mistake. You say Baruch Atah Hashem. Oh, I'm not just saying the bracha. What do you do? You say on being careful. So it's a passage, right? So some say Baruch Atah Hashem. If you didn't say B'Chai HaMesim, they say on being careful, and then go back. Then you only go back to Alter Gibber, like we mentioned before. That's what some opinions say. Now, Alter Rebbe doesn't speak about it, and it's not clear what Alter Rebbe holds. So I don't really have anything at this point clearly what to tell you. There's different opinions. But if you remember when you finish the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem B'Chai HaMesim, then you clearly go back to the beginning of the Amidah. Is it clear? And if you continue the next bracha, the beginning of the Amidah. Whether you remember, beginning of the Amidah. Now, you say Mash, when do you switch? The first day by Musaf. What's if you're not going to show? So, okay, so Musaf, that's the question. No, but it has to do from the time. So let's start the other way around. What's if you're going to show and you come late to show, right? It happens sometimes, maybe like once in a blue moon, and you come late to show, right? It could happen, such a thing, that you come sometimes late to show, right? So let's say it happens, and you come late. So if they're ready up to Musaf and you're up to Shachris, then you will say, you will switch to Me'eratol in Shachris. If you go according to what everyone does, that's how it is. From the time that the Gabbai bangs on the table, and it's not just an announcement that's just, just to let people know. It's actually halacha. Before Musaf, when we switch in Me'ed Hatov, it says in halacha, the Gabbai has to actually announce Me'ed Hatov. And when he announces it, then everyone switches. Come once, everyone should switch at the same time. Shouldn't be some do this, some do that. Once he says that, that's the switch. And if you're showing up to Shachris, you will also switch to Shachris by the old switch and Shachris to Me'ed Hatov. If you're home davening, so then you have to go according to what the shul is up to. you have different shuls, so you go according to whichever shul you daven, I would say, or whatever the majority of the shuls is. I haven't looked into it specifically, so it might be more details maybe to discuss another class. But generally, it is you go according. If you're home, you go according to the shul, where the shul up to, like the different shul. So I think it goes according to what's the regular time that the most of daven has to because exactly how it works. Now, we're switching to Ve'in Atol, and also we're switching to, then we're not asking for rain anymore. That is the same Talmud, we're going to say the same bracha. So after Yom Tov is over, when we start saying that bracha Baruch Aleinu, we're going to switch from Talmud to the same bracha. And the first step, Chumros, or if you daven united, it's the Matzah Yom Tov. First step, Chumros, to keep in mind that in the davening, you're switching your Me'il and the same bracha. Now again, if you make a mistake and you say the same Talmud to the bracha, what do you do? What do you do? You go back to the beginning of the bracha. Again, it's a common mistake that people aren't aware of. You know, they make a mistake and write it correct yourself. The same Talmud to the bracha, the same bracha, because you said the wrong thing, you correct yourself, right? And that's an immediate reaction. But no, you have to go back to the beginning of the bracha, Baruch Aleinu Hashem Elokeinu, the same bracha. That's what you're supposed to say. Also, you have to remember, you say Yahweh B'Yavai. So, we're doing Yahweh B'Yavai. And if you forget to say Yahweh B'Yavai, so before we go to Yahweh B'Yavai, nothing about Me'il Atol. So, if you remember later on that we did not say Me'il Atol, you said Mash V'Chumedeshin when you finish the Amidah, what do? You repeat the Amidah, because we said if you realize the middle of the Amidah, you go back to the beginning of the Amidah. So all these situations that whenever we say, if you remember in the middle, you go back to the beginning. So the same thing is also when you finish, you have to repeat it. Same idea. I'm telling you to go back, say Hashem again, because you didn't daven, it's not called davening. So when you finish, you go back to the beginning. And if you only realize much later on, so what do you do if you realize much later in the day? Anyone has any idea what happens then? You realize the first day Pesach, towards the end of the day, hey, I didn't say I davened Musaf, I did not say Me'il Atol. I said Mashu V'Roch Me'il Geshem. What do you do now? Anyone? What? You daven Musaf. You could daven Musaf all day. It's like Shach. Shach if you daven till midday. Musaf if you daven all day. Whenever you remember they didn't daven Musaf, or in this case, it's like you did an daven because you said you mentioned rain. It's like you want Yaitse. You could daven Musaf all day. The Chatchila Musaf should be daven before the 7th hour. 7th hour meaning that midday is about 1 o'clock. So that's the end of the 6th hour. So the end of the 7th hour is about 2 o'clock. The Chatchila, that's the proper time to daven Musaf before the 7th hour, end of the 7th hour. But if you didn't, you could daven all day. But if you did not, let's say you realize that you didn't say Me'il Atol in Mincha, and you only realize when it comes night. So now, what do you do if you didn't daven Mincha in general? You know what to do. Let's say you didn't daven Mincha, you didn't daven Shachar, and you only realize when it's the time for the next tefillah. So it says you can make up for what you missed. The daven that tefillah where you're up to. Let's take a minute for mine. Let's take a minute, okay? Usually I assume daven Shachar or something, right? You don't need to daven mine, I assume. So let's say you daven Mincha, then it comes night and you realize, oh, I didn't say Me'il Atol. So now you can make up for it, but the way to make up for it is that first if you daven the tefillah where you're up to, and once you're in that tefillah that you're supposed to be doing, then you can make up for it. You're sort of like connected. not really, it's not becoming one tefillah. In other words, tefillah daven ma'ariv, let's say, even though you don't usually daven ma'ariv, but if you want to make up for mincha, that's one way to do it. You daven ma'ariv, and right after the amidah for ma'ariv, you do another Shemini Esrei, and you have in mind it should be to make up mincha. And say right away, it doesn't mean literally, it says it should say something in between, like a like Ashrei, make some interruption in between, and then say Shemini Esrei again to make up for the tefillah that we missed. So your question is, if you're going, let's say, from weekday to Shabbos to weekday, that's what you're asking?
No, I'm thinking generally.
It's the same Amidah. But we're talking about, I'm discussing a regular situation with the same Amidah. So let's say, well, you have your question is going to be if you're going from Yom Tov, second day Yom Tov to Kol Hamoed. I'm discussing a regular case. You're going from the first day of Yom Tov to the second night. It's the same Amidah. It's interesting, if it's not the same, then there's a machlokes over there. If you do it, you don't. Then you don't do it because it's questionable. Good point. But if I'm about the same exact Amidah, then you just say the Amidah twice. Yeah. The second night of Pesach, you start doing Sfiras Omer, the counting of the Omer. What is the counting of the Omer? Because on the day after Pesach, that is, for us, it's the second day, but the Torah is only one day of Pesach, so it says in the Torah, the day following Pesach, they would bring the carbon Omer, which was, there's different types of sacrifices. There's sacrifices with animals, and then there's a mincha, a meal offering, which is we just had yesterday, in the last few days, in the chitas, about the sacrifices, about the meal offering, mixed flour and oil. So yesterday we actually had about the carbon omer. It mentions it in a few places. It mentions it yesterday also about the carbon omer, which is the meal offering, which is crushed barley with oil mixed together, and that's you take some of it, the kohen takes some of it and burns it on the mizbeach, the rest he eats. There's different types of meal offerings. This is one type, which was from barley, and that's from the new grain. And the Torah says that from this day you should count 7 weeks, and there's a mitzvah every day to count the Omer, which we start at night, and it starts with the second night of Pesach. We start doing Sfiras Omer. We'll get into more details later on. And then comes Kol Hamoed, and then the last 2 days of Pesach, which is a continuation. You have a question? I think the last 2 days of Pesach, it is a continuation to the beginning of Pesach. I think it's called Shminish of Pesach, the 7th day of Pesach. Not a new Yom Tov. It's not like, look, this, we have Shmini Atzeres. This is a continuation. And that's why the last 2 days of Pesach, when you light candles, when the men do Kiddush, they do not say Shechriyanim. But it's a continuation. It's not a new Yom Tov. But what's the reason behind it? Right, that's the fact. And why is it? Why is it not a new Yom Tov? Because what happened on the 7th day of Pesach? Kriyas Yom Tov, the splitting of the Red Sea, which is the culmination of Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're taken out of Mitzrayim, and that was not complete until we were saved from the Egyptians. The Egyptians were still chasing us. Then was the splitting of the Red Sea, and the Egyptians drowned. Now was the completion of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So it's only continuation. That's why there's no Shechriyanim. And on the deeper level, it's brought down the Sikhs and Ramadan that the first 2 days represents Yetzias Mitzrayim, and the last days represents the Gulasir, the future redemption. Now, why is the connection? Why are we connecting Yetzias Mitzrayim, going on Mitzrayim, with the future redemption? Because it just lines redemption. Why? Or just like everything we do have to put Mashiach into it? Is that what it is? No, because the whole purpose of Yetzias Mitzrayim was the Gula Asir, the future redemption. That's how it's explained in the Sichos and Amarim all over. The whole purpose of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of taking us out of Mitzrayim, is that we should be taken to Yisrael, build the base in English, and it should stay this way. That was the purpose. If the Jews would have merited, it would have been that way. And we didn't merit. So that was the whole topic of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the future redemption. And it says, it's brought down, that in Yetzias Mitzrayim, at that time, Hashem already gave us the koyach for our avodah to continue to come to the future redemption. So Yetzias Mitzrayim was sort of the, opened up the pathway for us to have the energy to be able to continue with our avodah to bring about the future redemption. So the last days of Pesach is essentially the culmination of Yetzias Mitzrayim. The simple level, it's Kriyas Yamsuf, but in the Red Sea, that's when Yetzias Mitzrayim was complete. But on a deeper level, on a real level, the culmination of Yetzias Mitzrayim is the future redemption. So the first days of Pesach are connected to Yetzias Mitzrayim, and the last days are connected to the future redemption. That's why we also have the last Achron Shel Pesach, is the meaning of having Mashiach Sudim. Then the meaning of having the 4 cases. The Mashiach Suda came from the Baal Shem Tov, and the 4 cases came from the Rebbe Nashab. And there's more to discuss about this. Maybe in other classes we go into more details. So we mentioned Tzvina Seimer. So let's talk a little bit more about Tzvina Seimer. So we count the Eimer. We start counting on the second night of Pesach. And who is obligated to count women? Are women obligated to count? Obviously, women are not obligated. You have the mitzvah, like you have shaita, then she'll have an essay, the mitzvah. But you don't have an obligation because it's time-bound mitzvah. Is this a mitzvah that's mandatory by the Torah, or is it rabbinic? Rabbinic. So there is an opinion that says it's Torah, but the halacha is that it's midrabanan, and because it's midrabanan, that's why it has certain leniencies. Like for example, you're allowed to count even before it's dark, so you don't have to wait until it's night. You're allowed halachically. I'm not saying that's the ideal way to do it. As you know, from past experience, you wait until it's dark, until you count the Eimer. But halachically, you could count already when the sun sets, because it's midrabanan and it's questionable if it's night or day. Something that's rabbinic, we could be lenient, and this is relevant to young children when you have to put them to sleep on time, and not only does it help, even because it's a difference. You save 25 minutes and you have to go to bed 7:30 until the sun sets. Could be much later than that, because sometimes if the sun sets that time of year, so it's like 8:15, 8:20, but it could help out. So like this, instead of going to sleep and then counting the following day, they could count after the sun sets, and they could count even with a bracha. The only thing is, if whoever's counting after the sun sets, they should make sure the sun actually sets. What do I mean? They should make sure the sun sets. God said, "I'll make sure the sun sets." What I mean is like this: that we always look at the calendar to find out when the sun sets. Like it comes before Shabbos, the men have to know when the sun sets. And when the sun sets, they can't do anything. They won't have to be strict. You don't want to take any chances with sunset. They can't, after sunset, they can't do any malacha. But over here, when it comes to counting the Eimer, if let's say you're going to be mean, you're going to be counting after sunset, now you want to make sure that actually the sun sets. So now there are opinions that say that the sunset is actually a few minutes later. Obviously, we stay away from that when it comes to men out of shop. We have to be careful to not do the walk after sunset. They're not going to make use of that opinion because they want to be strict with people Shabbos. But now, when you want to make sure that if the sun did set, because you can't count any before the sun sets, so whatever time you have in the calendar, it says sunset, you want to wait another 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes just to be safe. And then you're going to count. In other words, if you need to with children or whatever, usually it's more relevant children coming to sleep, and you guys have to wait till that time to count. And you can count even with the bracha. When you count the Omer, you're supposed to do it standing. Now, if, let's say, we all know this is a famous halacha that people know about, and if someone asks you what night is tonight, you don't tell them what's tonight, you tell them what was last night. What if someone asks you, what's tonight? And you say, 23. What do you do now? You already said it. What are you doing? So, you cannot count with a bracha, right? Wrong? Right? Huh?
Well, if you say, oh, 23 eggs, but if you say, oh, tonight is the 23rd.
Okay, so that's what I was getting to. But even without the eggs, if you just say 23, that's what I was getting to. Someone asked you, what's tonight? And you say 23. That's not called counting. Counting is only if you say tonight is 23. Now, you shouldn't do it. You still shouldn't do it because, you're leaning over the edge. You don't want to fall, right? You want to be careful. The other thing I was saying, last night was. Don't say 23. But I'm saying, if, let's say it happened, listen, what did they say? 23. Or you say, you say the 23. You didn't say tonight. That's not called counting. They say 23, that's called counting. You say tonight is, you count. Tonight is 23. 23. Even though you didn't say to the Omer, it doesn't matter. It's understood. You say tonight is 23. It's understood what you mean by that. When you just say a number 23, that's not called counting. So if it does happen, you could still count that night with a bracha. But if you said last night, you say, last night was 23, then you cannot count with a bracha. What does it mean you cannot count with a bracha? Which night? This night or to the end of the night? That night. That night you cannot count with a bracha. Now, if you don't count at all, a full 24-hour period, you forget to count at night. Now, let's go back for a moment. If you forget to count tonight, the following day you count without a bracha, right? But if I didn't count tonight and I didn't count tomorrow, then I cannot count anymore with the bracha. Now, it's not so much about the bracha. People always get stuck with the bracha, without a bracha, with the bracha. If you have bracha from someone else also. So if you can't go with the bracha, then in terms of bracha, it's not such a major issue. You hear bracha from someone else, have your mind. The point is, this thing cannot count with bracha is a much more serious thing. I don't mean serious, like serious something. Yeah, I'm saying in terms of the mitzvah, in terms of referring to the mitzvah of counting, what that is saying is that it could be you're not even doing the mitzvah. Could be there's no mitzvah. Why is it questionable to say the bracha? There's an opinion that says that once you miss a full 24-hour period, then there's no mitzvah anymore because the Torah says you count 7 complete weeks. So it's like one mitzvah. Now there's no mitzvah anymore. That's why you have to count without a bracha. So that's the bigger issue that you might not be doing the mitzvah. That's why you want to be careful. That's why it's important, especially with children, because what happens a lot of times with children is that they have to go to sleep. We're putting them to sleep and they cannot count at night. And the following day, they count during the day without a bracha. So what's better than that is even though it's better to count after it's dark, but halachically you're allowed to count after sunset too. So that's definitely a much better way to wait till after sunset to count with the bracha, as opposed to waiting until the next morning and then counting without a bracha. Because in that situation, you count without a bracha, It could be that there's no mitzvah even. So when counting with the bracha, it's not just about with the bracha, out of bracha. They saying with the bracha, that means you're for sure doing the mitzvah. There's an obligation. When you count without a bracha, that means why there's no bracha? Because maybe there's no mitzvah. So you're doing without a bracha. So it's not just about the bracha, it's about doing the mitzvah properly. Now, if from what time and on, if someone, so we said if someone asks you what's tonight, don't tell them. Say what was last night. From what time and on should you not tell them? Let's say it's 30 today. Let's say in the middle of school same. And last night was 22, and tonight is 23. If someone asks me, what are we counting tonight? I say tonight we're counting the 23rd day of the year. Is it a problem? I'm talking about tonight. It's not night yet. It shouldn't be a problem. So from what point is it a problem? From sunset or even earlier? Very good. An hour, yeah, it comes, it's about an hour, halachically it's an hour and a quarter. It's an hour and a quarter, but an hour will mean a halachic hour. So it could be more than 60 minutes actually. Some of the hours are longer. It can be more than 60 minutes. So hour and a quarter before sunset is called Plag HaMincha. And from that time, there is already an opinion that says that it's considered night. And from that time on, if someone asks you what's tonight, you should not answer them. But if someone did ask you, and you answered them, and it was before sunset, then you could count with a bracha. So if someone asks you after sunset, what's tonight, and you answer them, you cannot count that night with a bracha. But if someone asks you before sunset, even though you should not answer them, after Plag HaMincha, you shouldn't answer, you shouldn't tell them. But if someone did ask you what's tonight, and you did answer them, and it's before sunset, then you could count that night with a bracha. Okay, any questions?
Are we going to go over like acceptable products to use over Pesach, like hair, makeup?
Yes, we actually have on my list. Okay, we'll talk about it, yeah. You mean specific company names?
No, like things that we definitely cannot use, things that are permissible.
Okay,
So I found a list and it just said, but like they were okay, like all almost is okay.
well, it's hard to give detail of every single product. We could try. We could explain in general how it works, and then we could, I mean, yeah. We'll try, I'll try to go through.
Tomorrow morning, could I show you a product and see if it's okay?
But if you show me now, because I could time to deal with it.